Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in again. Today I thought I'd talk about a few selections from my library. So I picked out 3 books today, some of them that I've recently read over the last year or so, and I thought I'd introduce you to them if you haven't already been so. So we'll get right to it. The first book is called The Summer of Beer and Whiskey. And this book focuses on the St. Louis Browns, as they were called then, but they would soon be renamed the Cardinals. So not to be confused with the St. Louis Browns of the early 20th and mid 20th centuries that became the Orioles. That's a different Browns. So, but this St. Louis Browns, it was really the first rendition of the St. Louis Cardinals. It was established by a gentleman named Chris Vonderhaay. He was a German immigrant that made his way to St. Louis, and like all good Germans, drank a lot of beer. And he was a saloon keeper, and he wanted to do one thing, and that was sell more beer. So he created a baseball team. And not only did he do that, though, but he was instrumental in establishing the rival league to the then National League. The league that he helped establish was the American Association. Now, the National League at that time was pretty strict. Baseball was coming out of a period of time where there was a whole lot of turmoil within the sport itself, primarily with gambling and drinking. So the owners of the National League teams laid down a lot of hard and fast rules. In fact, if players were found guilty, if you will, of drinking or carousing out late at night, staying out past curfew, and just being just going against the rules of baseball, they were blacklisted. And they were kicked off the team, but they couldn't play for any other team. And all of the owners colluded against the players in this fashion. So when Vonderhaay came, he and some other owners got together and they formed an American Association, which had a lot more lax rules. Although they still tried to keep them in line, and certainly the gambling piece was a big no-no. So anyway, so this book focuses on that period of time, specifically 1883. That was the first year that Vonderhaay owned the Cardinals, and it goes into depth about that season. It talks about it really does a great job of depicting baseball in the late 19th century. So I recommend you reading this book if you're interested in that part of the baseball history. So The Summer of Beer and Whiskey. So that's book 1. Well, book 2 is a story we're all familiar with, Shoeless Joe Jackson and Ragtime Baseball. So this book here pretty much it complements the movie 8 Men Out very well. This book was written after 8 Men, well, my copy was at least published after 8 Men Out. And so it follows that storyline pretty well. And so there's not a whole lot of different enlightening news or information in this book than what you might pull out from the movie itself or may already be known. But it's a really, really good read if you're interested in that period of baseball and that event in baseball's history, that being the Black Sox scandal in 1919. But it does go into, I spent a lot of time talking about Joe Jackson and his rise into baseball and where he came from. And so that was a really, really interesting part of this book here is learning more about Joe Jackson. So anyway, Shoeless Joe and Ragtime Baseball. So the third book I have is about another player. It is Roberto Clemente. So this book here I picked this book up and to read it because I really wasn't familiar with Clemente outside of what is popularly known, right? So I picked this book up. I wanted to learn more about Clemente, about who he was as a person and as a baseball player, and it gave me all of that. So If you're interested in Clemente, this is a pretty good read. I was pretty surprised that this book didn't really dwell a lot on his philanthropy, and it talked a lot about him as an individual, and it really dwelled a lot on like some of his idiosyncrasies, like him being hypochondriac. Supposedly, he spent a lot of time apparently in the trainer's room every day, getting massaged and worked on, and it was one of those. He was one of those things. And then it also talked a lot about how he continually felt underappreciated as a player. And you can imagine, back in the 50s and 60s, most black baseball players did, and he was no different at being actually underappreciated for his skills. But it talks a lot about how he really, really dwelt on that a lot, and to the point of where he held a lot of grudges. And early in his career, he wasn't very much of a leader in the clubhouse because of that. But later in his career, he kind of started to relax a little bit and became that leader in the clubhouse that all baseball teams need from their veterans. So, but back to the philanthropy and the type of person that he was there, didn't really dwell on a lot of that. I mean, mentioned here and there. Sometimes it almost seemed like the book mentioned it as just a reminder in the middle of talking about his baseball and all the other things. His family life. It almost seemed like it says, "Oh yeah, by the way, don't forget, he's a generous person." So it's kind of different. I expected a lot more of that in this book, and there really wasn't there. But nonetheless, it was a great read, and certainly if you're looking for some insight on Clemente, this is a decent book for that. So there you go. Alrighty, so last thing I have for you today is the return of Album of the Week. And I'm still calling it Album of the Week. I don't know if I'll put them out weekly, but I'll try to do a lot better, especially as we get into the fall and winter seasons when my time isn't so taken up by other things. I've got more time to do this stuff. But this week's album is by a band that everybody loves. If you love rock music, everybody loves this band. And the particular album is Van Halen's 5150. So we all know the story if you know this type of music, right? This is Sammy Hagar's first record with Van Halen. David Lee Roth had left, and Sammy Hagar, who was a popular and successful artist in his own right, got recruited to be the lead singer for Van Halen, and this was their first record. And I'll be honest with you, when I heard that Sammy was joining Van Halen, I was not excited about it at all. I was a big Sammy Hagar fan back in the early 80s. And I liked Van Halen a lot as well, especially the earlier stuff. So, I mean, the album before this, 1984, I mean, it was okay. Still holds up well. Probably I like it better now than I did then. But this came along, so I wasn't super excited because I really didn't want to lose both Sammy and Van Halen, two bands that I really liked, and only get one thing in return. But when this came out, and the first song that I heard, it was kind of like a preview song that the radio station got here, local radio station in St. Louis got, and it was Good Enough. And when I heard that, I was like, that cannot be Sammy Hagar singing that song. But it sounded pretty good. I kind of liked it. Then their first single off of this record was Why Can't This Be Love? And I was hooked at that point because that is still one of my all-time favorite Van Halen songs from either era, the Roth era or the Hagar era. So this is just a fantastic record, start to finish. My favorite song on this is the title track, 5150. And like I said, Good Enough is still has a solid place in my heart because it was the first song that I heard off this record, and I really dig that. In fact, if I'll link it below in the description, but when Sammy Hagar toured last year with Michael Anthony and Joe Satriani, it was supposed to be Jason Bonham, but he didn't make it. But anyway, he toured and he played all of the Van Hagar stuff. And so I got a video of Good Enough. If you want to take a look at that, if you're interested in that, I'll link that down below as well. So this week's album of the week is Van Halen 5150. If you haven't heard it, I recommend you go and buy your local record store, finding it on your favorite streaming service, and give it a listen, because you will love it and you will thank me for it. So that is all I have for today. You guys have a great time. Thanks for watching.